Welcome back, everybody, to the Journeyman Podcast. We are back for episode 27, and we are going to dive deep into some really fascinating material. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on future deep dives.
It sounds good to me.
All right, so today we are tackling a really interesting topic to Donald Trump and the reactions that he provokes, particularly from the left.
Sounds fascinating.
Our main source today is going to be Sky News Australia video. The title of the video is called Lefties Losing It. John Oliver's anti-Trump rant backfires.
Okay.
And we also have some analysis documents that we're going to bring into the mix as well.
Very cool.
We can find a link to that video down in the description.
Awesome.
And while you're down there checking out that link in the description, you should go check out the Sky News Australia channel.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
They consistently offer some really sharp commentary and analysis, and they are definitely worth a subscribe.
Yeah, for sure.
So to help me unpack all of this, I am joined by my resident expert. Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely. I think it is fascinating how figures like Donald Trump generate such polarized responses. It's a great example of how differently people can interpret events and actions, especially in the political arena.
Yeah, it's like we're looking at two completely different realities sometimes.
Yeah.
The video that we're focusing on today leans to the right.
Okay.
And it paints a picture of Trump as a highly effective leader, despite his unorthodox style. Meanwhile, the left is portrayed as well, losing it over his every move.
That's a pretty good summary of the video's core argument. It uses humor and a touch of sarcasm to highlight what it sees as the left's tendency to overreact to Trump while simultaneously arguing that he is achieving significant results.
Yeah, and they use some pretty pointed examples to illustrate this point. Like they talk about John Oliver.
Okay.
And the video criticizes his comedic approach. They attribute his perceived decline in popularity to his intense dislike of Trump. And they even suggest that Oliver inadvertently showcased Trump's effectiveness by listing all of his accomplishments during a segment.
What's really interesting here is how they use this well-known figure like John Oliver to make a broader point about the left's reaction to Trump. By invoking a comedian who is often critical of Trump, they kind of aim to cast doubt on the validity of those criticisms, essentially suggesting that even Oliver, with his comedic slant, can't deny Trump's achievements.
Yeah, it's a clever rhetorical tactic for sure. They are using a familiar face to engage viewers and maybe even get them to question their own perceptions a little bit.
Yeah, very interesting.
And they also take aim at Jennifer Rubin, a political commentator.
Yeah, I know her.
And they use some pretty strong language to criticize her views on Republican.
Okay.
The video labels Rubin as possibly the dumbest woman in America. They're accusing her of being out of touch and even hysterical in her pronouncements. This choice of language is very deliberate. It's intended to be provocative and to discredit Rubin's opinions by attacking her intelligence, rather than like engaging with her arguments directly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that definitely adds to this us versus them feeling that runs throughout the video.
Yeah.
And it isn't just about policy disagreements.
Right.
It's about portraying the left as being almost irrational in their opposition to Trump.
Yeah.
The video goes beyond simply disagreeing with the left's viewpoints. It frames their reactions as evidence of a deeper problem, a kind of mass hysteria or delusion that's gripping those who oppose Trump.
It's wild. They even bring up a transgender activist who feared concentration camps under a Trump presidency. And they are using this as another example of the left's alleged tendency to overreact.
Wow, using that specific example of, the transgender activist fears, particularly the invocation of concentration camps, that is likely intended to tap into existing anxieties about social change and to portray the left's concerns as extreme and unfounded.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So we've got this image of the left being completely over the top in their reactions to Trump.
Yeah.
But what about their portrayal of Trump himself? Because they seem to argue that despite his really unconventional methods, he's actually a masterful strategist.
Yeah, I see that. They point to actions like his criticisms of NATO, which they argue ultimately led to increased defense spending by member nations.
Oh, yeah. They also mention his interest in Greenland, which supposedly prompted Denmark to step up its defense efforts there. It's like they're saying he's playing 4D chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Ah, That's a great way to put it. It's about seeing the bigger picture, the long game, even if the initial moves seem confusing or even outrageous to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they even bring up his alleged attempts to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine during his presidency.
Oh, yeah, but those attempts were met with a lot of criticism, right? So how does the video address that?
They bring in Armie Horowitz, who's a filmmaker and a journalist, to defend Trump's actions. Horowitz emphasizes the need to wait and see the ultimate impact of a leader's decisions, suggesting that we might not fully grasp the brilliance of Trump's moves until much later.
So it's all about trusting that there's a method to the apparent madness.
Precisely. Horowitz argues that we shouldn't be so quick to judge actions that seem erratic on the surface. He suggests that what might appear impulsive or even reckless could be part of a much larger, more intricate strategy.
Yeah, it's a perspective that really challenges the conventional wisdom surrounding Trump. You know, he was often criticized for being unpredictable and impulsive, but this video asks us to consider that maybe there was a calculated purpose behind those actions.
Yeah, it's a compelling argument. It really is. It kind of makes you wonder if we were too quick to judge those actions, without understanding the full context.
Yeah.
But the video doesn't just focus on Trump's supposed strategic genius.
Right.
It also spends a considerable amount of time critiquing his successor, Joe Biden.
Okay, so what do they have to say about Biden?
Well, they go into this really intriguing anecdote about Joe Biden and a decision regarding LNG exports. And according to the video, Speaker Mike Johnson claimed that Biden seemed completely unaware that he had signed an executive order pausing those exports. Oh, wow. So they're using this story to suggest that Biden might be, incompetent or even more intriguingly, controlled by forces behind the scenes. Almost like a puppet, right?
Exactly. The video contrasts this image of Biden with their portrayal of Trump as a leader who, despite his, unorthodox methods, was firmly in control and making his own decisions. It raises questions about who's really calling the shots in government, which is a theme that resonates with a lot of people, especially those who feel disillusioned with the political establishment.
Absolutely. Yeah, it feeds into that distrust of institutions that we see so often these days. Like the video saying, don't believe everything you see. There might be hidden agendas at play.
Yeah, for sure. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about another theme that runs throughout this video.
Yeah.
The idea that Western culture is in decline and the left is to blame.
Okay.
They repeatedly emphasize this concept of the death of Western culture.
Yeah.
And they are linking it to the perceived decline in patriotism, particularly among younger generations. It's a pretty stark claim. What do you make of it?
Well, it's certainly a provocative argument. They use really strong language and imagery to evoke a sense of crisis, suggesting that the values and traditions of Western civilization are under attack. They even use the term Western supremacy, which is loaded with historical baggage and immediately raises red flags.
Yeah, and it feels like they're trying to stoke fear and anxiety, tapping into those existing concerns that many people have about the future of their countries and their cultures. But isn't the world a much more complex place now than it was in the past?
Absolutely, you're right. We live in an era of globalization and rapid technological advancements, which have undeniably led to, significant social and cultural shifts. The video seems to kind of romanticize a bygone era, a time when there was supposedly more unity and shared values.
But is that a realistic view of history? And is it really fair to just blame the left for these changes?
Those are excellent questions. Attributing these complex societal shifts solely to one political ideology is a vast oversimplification. The video doesn't acknowledge all the numerous other factors that have contributed to these changes, like things like technological advancements, economic globalization, and even the rise of social media.
Yeah, it feels like they're presenting a very black and white view of a world that's actually full of shades of gray.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get caught up in that kind of simplistic narrative, especially when it's presented with such conviction and emotion.
You're absolutely right. That is the danger of these types of narratives. They offer easy answers to complex problems and often rely on fear and division to mobilize audiences. But let's kind of delve a little deeper into one particular aspect of this decline of Western culture argument, and that is the focus on declining patriotism.
Okay.
They cite statistics about declining national pride, especially among young people in Western countries. And they even share this little anecdote about a coffee shop that didn't display the American flag on the 4th of July. What's really fascinating here is how the video links declining patriotism to a deliberate effort by the left to undermine Western society.
Okay.
They go so far as to actually label the left a fifth column, which is a term historically used to describe a group working secretly within a country to aid its enemies.
Wait, so what exactly does fifth column mean? I am not familiar with that term.
So imagine a country facing an attack from like an external enemy. A fifth column would refer to like individuals or groups within that country who are secretly supporting the enemy, perhaps through sabotage or espionage. It's a term that really implies treachery and betrayal.
Oh, wow. So by labeling the left a fifth column, they are basically accusing them of being traitors to their own countries and cultures.
Precisely. It's a powerful accusation, and it speaks to the depth of the divide that the video is trying to portray. They're suggesting that the left's actions are not merely misguided, but actively harmful to the fabric of Western society.
But is it fair to paint such a broad brush? I mean, aren't there a variety of viewpoints and motivations within any political group?
Of course. To suggest that everyone on the left is engaged in some coordinated effort to undermine Western values is absurd. However, this type of rhetoric is effective because it taps into those existing anxieties and creates a clear enemy to rally against.
Right. It's easier to mobilize people when they feel threatened, even if that threat is exaggerated or misrepresented. And this video certainly doesn't shy away from using fear as a motivator.
Right. It's a classic tactic. Create a sense of urgency and danger, then present yourself or your ideology as the solution. And it's a tactic that we see employed across the political spectrum, not just on the right.
So how do we, as viewers, navigate this really complex landscape of information and narratives? How do we separate fact from fiction? How do we separate genuine concern from fear-mongering?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? In an age of information overload and echo chambers, it's more important than ever to be critical consumers of information. We need to really question our sources, consider their biases, and look for evidence to support or refute the claims that they're making.
It's like we are detectives, piecing together a puzzle, looking for inconsistencies, gaps in logic, and alternative explanations. And, we can't be afraid to challenge our own assumptions and biases in the process.
Exactly. Being a critical thinker requires humility and a willingness to be proven wrong. It means being open to hearing perspectives that differ from our own and recognizing that there are often multiple valid interpretations of events.
And that is what makes these deep dives so valuable, right?
Yeah.
They force us to confront uncomfortable truths, to really think critically about the world around us, and to engage in these meaningful conversations.
Speaking of meaningful conversations, I'd like to circle back to that LNG anecdote for a moment.
Okay.
It's a fascinating example of how narratives can be used to undermine trust in leadership.
You're talking about the claim that Biden was unaware of the executive order that he signed, pausing LNG exports.
Precisely. The video uses this story to paint a picture of Biden as either incompetent or controlled by unseen forces. It plays into this broader narrative about his mental fitness and ability to lead, which has been a recurring theme in right-wing media. It's a tactic we've seen used against other politicians as well. It's a way to sow doubt and create uncertainty about a leader's capabilities. And it can be really effective, especially when it's amplified through social media and partisan news outlets.
Yeah, and it's also a tactic that can be really difficult to counter.
Yeah.
How do you prove that you are not incompetent or that you're not being manipulated by others? It becomes a he said, she said situation, and it's ultimately up to the audience to decide who to believe.
Right.
And that decision is often influenced by, pre-existing biases and beliefs.
Yeah.
Like, if you already distrust Biden, this story will likely confirm your suspicions. But if you're more inclined to trust him, you might dismiss it as partisan propaganda.
Yeah, that's a good point. It highlights how important it is to be aware of our own biases and how they can really shape our perceptions of events. It also underscores the need to seek out information from a variety of sources, not just those that confirm our existing worldview.
Yeah, for sure. It's about getting the full picture, recognizing that there are multiple perspectives and interpretations, and being willing to hold those perspectives in tension.
Absolutely. And sometimes, even after all that, we're still left with more questions than answers, but that's okay. The journey of discovery is just as important as the destination.
That's a great way to put it. It's about embracing the complexity and recognizing that there's always more to learn. And that's what makes these deep dives so exciting, right? They challenge us to think critically and to engage with these different perspectives, even the ones we might initially disagree with.
Absolutely. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, revealing new insights and perspectives with each layer. And even though it can be a bit messy and sometimes even make you cry, it's ultimately a rewarding process.
Oh, I love that analogy. It perfectly captures the spirit of what we are trying to do here.
Yeah.
We're not afraid to get our hands dirty and delve into the messy complexities of the world. And sometimes that messiness leads us to some unexpected discoveries. Like, for example, the video also touches on a topic that might surprise some viewers. Trump's executive order expanding access to IVF.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. They actually praise him for that action.
Yeah.
And they frame it as evidence that he's actually pro-family and pro-life.
It's a bit of a head-scratcher considering the common narrative about Republicans and their stance on reproductive rights.
It is. But what's really interesting is how they use this specific example to challenge that conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to broaden Trump's appeal and present him as a champion for families, even those who might not fit the traditional mold.
It's a clever move, strategically speaking.
Yeah.
By highlighting this particular action, they're attempting to appeal to a wider audience and paint a more nuanced picture of Trump's values.
You did it. It also raises an important question. How do we define family values? Is it solely about opposing abortion, or does it also encompass supporting families who are struggling to conceive?
Yeah, it's a complex issue with no easy answers. And it's one that's often overshadowed by the more polarizing debates surrounding things like abortion and same-sex marriage.
Yeah, and perhaps that's the point. By highlighting Trump's support for IVF, they are trying to shift the conversation away from those more divisive issues and focus on something that has broader appeal, something that resonates with people across the political spectrum.
Yeah. It's a reminder that we need to be careful about buying into those simplistic narratives, especially when it comes to complex issues like family values. You know, there's often more to the story than what meets the eye.
Absolutely. We need to be willing to dig deeper, to question our assumptions, and to consider the full context before forming an opinion. And sometimes that means acknowledging that even those we might disagree with on some issues can have valid points on others.
It's about recognizing the humanity in those we disagree with, even when it's difficult. And it's about being open to the possibility that we might actually learn something from them, even if we don't agree with everything they say.
Very well said. We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. You know, exploring those contrasting portrayals of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We unpacked those anxieties surrounding the decline of Western culture, and we even managed to find some humor along the way.
It has been a fascinating journey, and like any good journey, it's left us with more questions than answers.
Right.
But that's the beauty of it all, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's about embracing the unknown and being open to new possibilities. And who knows, maybe those unanswered questions will lead us to even more intriguing deep dives in the future.
I certainly hope so. There's always more to learn, more perspectives to explore, and more conversations to be had.
And on that note, we are wrapping up this episode of the Journeyman Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, and be sure to check out the Sky News Australia video that we discussed. The link is down in the episode description. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.